Hi, this is Monica Louie from OurDebtFreeFamily.com, and today I am so excited to share with you my interview with Lisa Phillips from Affordable Real Estate Investments. Lisa is a real estate investment coach specializing in sub 30K investment properties. I brought Lisa on to talk about what do you do with your money after you've gotten out of debt? What do you do with that extra money each month that's not going toward your debt payments? Well, there are numerous options. You could save more for college, you could invest more for retirement, you could start a business, but what about creating multiple income streams by investing in real estate? And that's what Lisa shares with us today. She helps people, and she's done it herself, purchase rental properties for only $30,000 to $40,000 total. Now let me be clear. That is not $30,000 to $40,000 for a down payment for a rental property. That is for the purchase of the rental, including the cost of renovations if necessary, and getting renters in the door. In the interview, Lisa shares where to look for these properties, best practices for working with contractors to help you with renovations if necessary, and what to look for when finding good renters. Very important. If you're not ready yet to invest in real estate and you're still digging yourself out of debt as we are, then this interview with Lisa will motivate you to look at the bigger picture of what opportunities are available to you beyond the debt. What can you do with your money once the debt is gone? This was a fantastic interview, and I am so excited to share this with you today. So here is my interview with Lisa Phillips from Affordable Real Estate Investments. Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Monica. I'm excited to be here.
So can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself? So how did you get started in real estate investing?
There are a lot of ups and downs to this story, but the most immediate one was that I found myself around 2009. I just purchased a $35,000 condo and I was laid off again for the second time within 2 years. And so what happened with that is that because I could not find another job and I tried, but guess what? It just didn't matter. I'm applying and there's 400 other people applying to the same job with more experience. I just wasn't getting hired. But there was two things that were occurring during this time. One, the unfortunate part was that had to do a foreclosure on the house I left in Las Vegas. See, I was in Ohio now because I had to leave once I got laid off from that job to find another job in Ohio. I got laid off from that job in 2009 during the recession, so I was stuck with this new condo. But there's some things I learned from that, and this is the positive side. One, I learned that a $35,000 condo doesn't have to be that terrible, and two, I was able to find a roommate, and with her rent, it was only $650 a month. But I found out at a price that low of how much it costs to acquire it. Not only did I pay the mortgage, HOA fees, I actually paid all the utilities. So for a very scary time, a second layoff, can't find another work, that was the most secure asset, securest thing that I have ever purchased. And it was only because it was at such a low price. And you know what I mean? And you can turn that asset as a home, as even in renting a room, let alone the whole house, into a moneymaker during your darkest of times. And you know, I was facing the prospect of like moving back in with my parents. And let me tell you, when you graduate with an electrical engineering degree and you're laid off twice within 2 years, you do not want to go and live with your parents. That is embarrassing. So it just doesn't matter who you are, how smart you are, that can happen. But with me being able to survive and quite comfortably with that price range was such an amazing feeling of security during a time that I couldn't find work. And so ever since then, I was like, I got to keep doing this. And I learned that there's just different markets where, you know, sub 30K housing existed. And because of the foreclosure I had to go through, I couldn't get a mortgage. I can't get a mortgage actually until this year, into December. And I was like, I want to keep doing this. I'm not waiting 7 years in order to invest again. And so what happened was I finally got a job offer in DC and I went out there and I was like, I want to recreate this. I can at least do one house a year at this price range. You know, I can save half my paycheck and do this. So literally, I'm living in a dumpy, expensive apartment in Arlington, Virginia, right across the bridge from DC, but I'm acquiring rental properties that are nicer than my apartments. But the goal was to like have that income because I was scared. I can't keep getting laid off and be facing the prospect of not having anything to rely on when I found out that that worked. So I did it again in Baltimore and I did it again in Richmond. And I was like, I got to tell people about this because there's people out there like me who we don't have a lot of money, but we can go into these neighborhoods. They're not all bad. Some are places I probably wouldn't live unless I had to, but it still isn't a bad neighborhood. And half of us sort of came from these neighborhoods at some point in time. Just because we got a degree and got a job and we're no longer anywhere near it doesn't mean that we might not have grown up in that neighborhood long ago. So, like take that familiarity and like turn it into cash flowing real estate that can pay for itself in 3 to 4 years and be just pure monthly cash flow. So that started this whole revolution of being able to go out and go, hey, I'm going to start talking about it. No one was talking about this before. They're like, no, don't go in this neighborhood. And you're like, that thinking is so like blanket statement. You don't make money with blanket statements. You make money with finding nuance. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work any other way. And all that cookie cutter advice they give you just wasn't going to work for me in my situation with the foreclosure. So that's the start and why I started going, let's talk about this. Why are we leaving all this money on the table? People like me are more than happy to go into the neighborhoods that you are so scared of that aren't that bad and, invest in them and be quite fine doing it.
So you've created multiple income streams for yourself by finding these properties, and then so you find them and then you can find renters for them right away, or how does that work?
Yeah, if you never have a problem with renters. If anything, you have a problem with your price or your rents, but not with the renters. If you're too high, you're not going to get anybody. So you always have to be really conservative with your estimates. But I always get someone within 2 weeks. I mean, I have applications. It usually takes 2 weeks of applications because I do deny quite a few people before I do find someone.
Okay, and then most of these properties are sub 30, you said, so they're costing you less than 30,000 to acquire.
Or 35. So yeah. So 30K is like the moniker. That's what I look for. But as you get older, you might go, if you pay 20,000 but you put 20,000 into it, that's a 40K house. So if you find one for a different price range, you can wiggle around with it. It just depends on where you're at as an investor.
So if somebody is thinking about getting into, maybe they've got some money set aside and they are thinking about maybe investing in real estate or investing in the stock market, what would you say to them? What's your opinion on that?
If you follow the cookie cutter advice, and it's honestly just keep your money in the bank and not do anything with it. Maybe the stock market if you want. I mean, you really have to have, I think, for the stock market that 40 years because there are really significant dips that take 5 to 10 years to get out of. So if you're close to retiring, the stock market isn't necessarily an okay risk with the recessions that can come and take 30-40% out of your portfolio, right? Let's say you have 40-50 years. So if we do have a recession like we did and it drops 40% and it comes back up, well, you can ride that 15-20 year segment out. So if we really want to get into it, but personally, so what was your question again? Sorry, I was just
like weighing the pros and cons of investing in real estate versus investing in the stock market.
Okay.
Because I know you have opinions.
I do. So in general, they're both financial skills, and it doesn't matter how smart you are in life. You can be, a scientist and still lose money in real estate and or engineering or stock market. And it's not because you're not intelligent. It's not that. It's just a new financial skill that you really have to delve into to be accomplished at. However, I do prefer real estate for many reasons. The main reason is that the stock market really is dependent on a lot of people's input that I really don't think should have any control over my money. So when the market gets panicky and they sell something off because they hear a rumor, and all of a sudden that stock falls or the Dow Jones falls because people are yanking their money out. I don't want my money dependent on people who don't have the steadfastness to push through, but guess what? You have to. I don't like that variability. So yes, historically they say that it usually does come back, But I literally think we're entering into new times where you can't just say I don't know where we're going. 19 trillion in debt and more. Everyone's dumping the dollar to pay for their own. All of our economies are just so variable. I'm talking from Europe to China to Russia to here. It is, we're definitely walking a fine line with actually being able to pay our bills. So that is something that highly concerns me with the coming stock market. I don't like the volatility. I don't like the valuations. I'm looking at, LinkedIn, which, I was reading a report some time back, and it was like, this company has not made a profit in the last 8 quarters, but they're valued at $1 billion. But this one company that has tons of profit each and every month is valued at like $20 a share. And you're like, and so to me, like this fuzzy math just doesn't make sense. The valuations, the price to earning ratios don't make any sense. They look at almost different factor per business. So it's hard to get like such a strict metric. And with that level of variability with wealth, and some people have been putting money in the stock market for like 40 years. And, people like my mom took a hit of 30% in 2009 and they haven't recovered all that money yet. And she's retired. So like I said, if she was a young kid, that would have been fine. But by the time you get to her age after 25 years, it's a lot of money to lose and not be able to get back at the time when you need it. And the thing is, stock market's easy. You can just put money in an account and people manage it for you. Well, you pay for that ease and not necessarily having control over your investment. So I understand it's easy and you don't have time, but honestly, I think you would honestly do better if you just took your money, and I'm not crazy or anything. I think you would just do better if you took all that money you put in the stock market and just kept it in a bank. And I know that sounds crazy, or buy gold. Like, I think you would literally come out better for it. So that's my view. I'd rather just do that versus having it go up and down with products that don't make sense and an economy that's not heading. You can say what you want about this economy. I don't care what CNN tells me. Jobs have left and aren't coming back. So a lot of, you know what I mean? A lot of people are getting supported by the government who isn't paying their debts, and not to get too into that, it just doesn't seem like a solid foundation to me. Whereas with real estate investing, I can get insurance on my real estate. You gain experience, so you know what you're looking for. People do always need a home, and you can fix that house up as nice as you want. And it's just something where it's like, I know exactly the returns I'm going to get before I go in. And some of those returns are 30%, over the year. And I just can't, you can get 4%. Or maybe if you get Facebook and keep it, but yeah, I have time for that. I know I can do real estate, and then at the end of the day, I can refinance it. And trust me, we do if we need to. I can sell it. We plan on, for every kid, we're going to keep the property for 18 years and sell it, and that's going to be, not only will it be paid off and gave us income all that time, that's going to be their startup fund. There's just so much more that you can do with it and have control. And it doesn't matter what the market is or who's crazy or who's panicky. It just matters how you manage it. And if you are, you have a little bit of integrity, like manage it the same way you'd want someone to manage your own home, it consistently works out really well. So that is why. And all the horror stories, people don't always know what they're doing. You can't take those horror stories that in the stock market or in real estate and apply it to yourself, because I've met people and I'm like, you're not a good landlord. So you're not good at picking houses. So you can't take other people's bad stories and put them on you, because you might have a little bit more integrity or skills, or listen more or seek out or have mentors, and the other people didn't. And you shouldn't ever judge everyone else's success or lack of it to yours if you're worried about it. So that's sort of an overview of why I do not like the stock market.
So real estate to you is just more cut and dry, more predictable, and you're more in control.
100% on all three of those. And some of us have a need to be more in control. And I grew up pretty poor, so I've earned what I've earned up to this point, and I'm nowhere near rich, but it's mine. And I don't want it going anywhere. It was very hard work getting that money, and you know what I mean, in that 401k account or whatever. And I don't like it going because other people are panicky. I can't work that hard for that to happen, and it can.
Right. Okay. So now, when finding, if somebody was interested and wanted to find a place for around 30, 35 or so
Sure.
to purchase and then rent out for an added income stream. How long does that process take? Because I know that you help people with this process. So from start to finish, when they decide, okay, this is what I want to do, to actually getting a renter in the home, how long does that normally take? I know there can be variables.
It can be variable. So there's people who just go out and do it on their own. And it could be, if they are new and aren't very sure about what they're doing, it could be, 3 months to 8 months. Then that's just because they're not sure, they don't know, they get stuck in a renovation, they get stuck with tenants, they get stuck not renting out, and they don't know, oh, if you lowered that rent, like something new investors don't know, if you lower that rent by $75, you can get someone in a week. You know what I mean? But they don't know that. So they keep it high and they go 4 months trying to get the extra $75, whereas an experienced investor would have been like, cut that out, lower it, boom, you got someone, and the 4 months empty doesn't account for like all that missed rent that you got, that 4 months of missed rent. So it can take time in different aspects, or they don't structure their renovation contract correctly with a general contractor, and they get stuck, or they overpay and then they run out of money because they didn't regulate it a little bit more to their benefit. So it can take 3 to 8 months, sometimes a year. And like mine took a year. I tell everybody I was such a newbie, so it was a learning lesson. The reason I was able to start telling people about it, because I learned so many, but from my mistakes. So it can take 3 months to up to a year if you don't know. The people I work with, so I work with people a couple ways. I have like an online course, and I've noticed that with that information, knowing what to do and the parameters and how to structure things, if they go on their own, usually within like 9 months, they'll have it after they take it. So, maybe 3 or 4 months in, they might start looking. So they have about a 5 month turnaround time, but they're still going through, slight repairs and whatever I notice when I keep track. And the people I work with one-on-one, for the most part, it just takes about 12 weeks total, 8 weeks to make the purchase, but, an extra 4 to 6 to do the renovation. But I usually try to steer them towards markets and houses that don't need as much repair. So in that case, it's more of a 6 week than an 8 week or 10 week renovation project. But renovation projects, if they're big, can be 3 months. And that's just because, there's only 4 or 5 general contractors that can do it in that town, and they're all busy. So, you know what I mean? Like, you're just not going to get it like that, unless sometimes you pay double, and you don't always have the flexibility to pay that with your investment and make out,
Right. So when you work with people and then in your course, you've got a process that you follow. So can you give us an overview of what that looks like?
The process. Well, I can tell you in general, first thing first is, so there's 2 things. By the time people get to me, they've already made a couple decisions. But for your audience, the decisions that you need to make before you even get to my site is, what type of real estate investing do I want to do? Do I want to flip? Do I want to wholesale? Do I want to buy and hold and have rental properties? Do I want to be a landlord? Or do I just want to own rental properties and not be a landlord? So you have to make those decisions first. 2, once you make that decision, what's your budget? How comfortable are you? What market are you in? And are you willing to travel to another market if the only thing you see in your neighborhood, like I do in DC, was like, $300,000, $250,000 for a condo? Do you want to go that route with that type of cash flow? And make $200 a month, but maybe in 10, 30 years you pay it off. And so, make that decision. And once you get there and you're like, you know what? I want to buy rental properties. I'm willing to look at other markets that aren't necessarily my home markets, and I want to do it in this price range, sub 30K, 40K. That's when they should be at my site. You got it? And I just go over that overview because you can't just jump to my site if you're still thinking you want to do flipping or wholesaling. You got to have a whole nother skill set to learn in that endeavor, and they're not the same. So you're definitely... it's just different skill sets. That's all it is. So those are decisions they make before they get to my site. So once they're on my site, then we're like, okay, let's look. What is your financing options if you want to stay in this price range? What are the markets that we're going to look at for you? Because I have clients in California, New York City, Georgia, Indiana. So they all have different ideas of what markets they're willing to go to look for. Some are right in their backyard, and some aren't. It just depends on them. So we just get really specific with them on helping them figure out their market. So that's on the course or working one-on-one. And then once we get the market, then we can start hammering down on properties. So it does go in a line, financing, getting that straightened. Then what market will have the deals you want? Because I just talked to a gentleman who's in Reston, Virginia, which is the Northern Virginia area, which can be very expensive. And he's like, well, I found a property. It's about $240,000. It makes $300 in cash flow. And that could be your choice. And for me, I make $900 in one property that's fully paid off. It was paid off in 3 or 4 years. And, you know, in order for him and me to be at the same cash flow, he would have to buy 3 of those properties at $240,000 in Reston, Virginia. Or he could have just went to one market over like I did when I was in the DC area when I found it. So you really have to start making those choices. Do you want to pay that money to get that type of neighborhood and that cash flow that in 30 years will pay for itself, but before that, you need, $750,000 or $800,000 to get the same cash flow that I had with spending so much less money and making a smaller bite-sized budget, but willing to travel a little bit more from where I live. So once we get to that point, then we start. So yeah, that's the market conversation, which is a big part of the conversation on doing this, on identifying it to your needs. And then it's looking at properties once we hit that. Okay, so we know what we want. We know we want these lower price properties. We know we want this type of look. We know we want this type of return. Boom, let's look at properties. Properties. And then, so, it's very logical, the step by step. It's just the nuances at each point to make it so it's not cookie cutter, which doesn't work for a lot of people, which is why they haven't done anything yet, and make it geared towards them so they know the systems to put in place to keep going at each juncture.
Now, what really appeals to me about this is that we're currently working on paying off our mortgage, and then once we have that paid off, we have thought about investing in real estate, but like you said, looking around here, we'd have to have probably at least $300,000 to, if we want to pay cash, which we want to pay cash, we don't want to finance anything further once our mortgage is paid off. And so, but thinking about how we could invest $30,000 to $40,000 into a property and get it up and running and, bringing in another income stream is just very appealing, after just a few months of work. So that's what I really like about this. Yes.
It's bite-sized piece. And I actually really like it because someone doesn't necessarily want to go $300,000 in on their first round of real estate investing. Because what if you're wrong? And a lot of people have been. And they're stuck with the house that doesn't cash flow, and they're calling me like, what should I do? I'm like, sell it, take the hit, and pay the mortgage off. Because they're underwater. I'm like, honestly, do you have 10, 15 years? Because if you don't, sell it, pay the $20K that you're under, and let's start this fresh. You know what I mean? So it's not easy to do that. Anyways, even if you get a mortgage, 20% of $200,000 is $40,000. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Give your money to me. What are you doing?
Well, because if you can come up with $40,000 for a down payment for a property like that, then you can use the $40,000 for one of these other properties. It's just a shift in where you're looking.
Yeah, and a little bit, these are usually working class neighborhoods, which I'm so comfortable saying. Like I said, I came from a lower working class neighborhood to where I am now. I can talk about it because I'm like, woof, where I came from. You should have seen it. I'm good now. So I'm a little bit more comfortable talking about that. And I think everyone else has been uncomfortable talking about it. And that's why you didn't have this discussion. They've always existed. You know what I mean? The house that I grew up in was a $30,000 house, and they purchased it like 40 years ago. Right? So it's that does exist in certain places. So it's also a conversation of, it's not like I said, I don't necessarily live in the houses that I own. If I had to in a pinch and I had nothing else, I'd do it. But, I work really hard to make sure I can stay in the neighborhood I'm in at, no matter the price point that I'm in. So that's what everything's geared for. Those houses are to make sure I can stay here just in case I get a job loss. But, just being more comfortable talking about it, and no one else has. And it's amazing when you start the conversation how people are like, yeah, dude, it's okay. There's a lot of us out there.
So now some of these properties will need some renovations. So do you have advice, or do you give advice when working with people on finding contractors or are most of the renovations DIY? I know you mentioned contractors, so you have, best practices to follow in finding help.
When I started out, I did DIY to save money. But you know what? Then you start doing a few of those. You get to the point where you're like, let me pay for this. Because there's opportunity costs. When it takes you all that extra time, where someone who's a professional would have taken them 30 minutes, but it took you, 3 hours to learn how to repipe this, sink because you're new to it. So you're like, okay, do I have the time to do that versus just getting done and pay the premium to have someone else do it? So when you start off, you tend to do DIY and you can learn a lot of good skills that way. But there does become a point where you're like, okay, I'm done. Let me just pay somebody $80 to do this, get it done in 10 minutes. We can go on, because some of the earlier DIY decisions keep you in your rental property being unoccupied longer. And then you're like, how much money did I save when I could have recovered it by having a renter in sooner, by paying a contractor the premium on their services to do it. So basically I say you pay now or pay later. So if you're trying to be cheap and go Craigslist, well, guess what? You're going to pay later, because that's just what it is. Reputable, responsible, and you can find these people on Craigslist. I have, but that really depends on what state you're in. In Ohio, when I was out there, it's a very DIY state, culture. The people there all know how to lay tile and do it yourself. When I was out on when I'm out on the East Coast, though, you don't necessarily have that same, when you're in an agrarian or agriculture type state where people are sort of maintenance living. They learn to DIY themselves, but when you get to the city, you don't necessarily have that. So all the common people you see on Craigslist aren't necessarily people who grew up doing their own DIY. So it really depends on what part of the country you're in, where paying the lower price can really work, because so many people have that skill set. And that's just something that you gain with experience as you enter into different markets. But, so now I'm more of a pay now so I don't pay later. And so there's different things you have to do. One tip is you need to get at least 3 estimates. Every single job I get, when I used to do the general contracting myself and hiring everybody, I swear they all were the same, from electrical to plumbing to carpeting. It was 1,000, 3,000, or 12,000. It'll range. You know what I mean? Your renovation, it could be 10,000 with this guy and 40,000 with this guy. Same exact renovation. Okay, so are you hearing this? So regardless, you need to ask a lot. And the more bids you get, the better the price you get, and the better you're able to vet. Well, sometimes you do pay for the 3,000 versus 1,000 because this comes with bigger warranty. They're a bigger team. They can do it. It's not like this some guy who just does it out of his truck. It's like a whole crew of people. And then you could really start making those decisions. But if you just take the first estimate you get, you're going to be toast. Don't do that. So that's one of there's other systems you can put in place too, but that's the big one. And just remember, you pay now or pay later. Prefer to pay now. So don't go too cheap. I know you want to. I did it. And I had to redo a lot of things. So now I get contractors who are good. And if they charge a little bit more, you're like, all right, maybe that's an extra 2 more months before everything is fully paid for. But when you're talking 3 to 5 years, because of the cost of the acquisition, it's a doable amount.
And so you're paying for that added peace of mind that it's going to be done right.
And future, peace of mind's the biggest. But just as big is future maintenance costs. Because when it's done right, and all of my contractors at this point, they did a great job. You just have so many minimal maintenance issues. When you pay up front and pay now, you just aren't having crazy issues with plumbing. Just very minimal.
That's great advice to get 3 quotes, because we had to do some work on our house before we sold it last summer, and we had a situation where we had gotten a few quotes from different contractors, and then one contractor who was a little bit higher said, well, what did they offer? Okay, we could do it for that. So it was good negotiating power. So that's great advice.
In addition, yes, ma'am.
So what are your tips for finding and then keeping good long-term renters? I know that you mentioned earlier, you said you turn some people away. So what are you looking for in a good renter?
So in this neighborhood, you just approach it a little bit differently. I like to say in these neighborhoods, they were like my parents. My parents did not choose this neighborhood based because the school was the best school. And don't get me wrong, we're good kids. We got through it, straight A's, honestly. My mom had 7 kids, but they weren't, it's not the type of neighborhood where they're like, oh, we're paying $400,000 so my kid can go to this school, right? So, and that's nothing wrong with that, but you got to understand, it's just like, you got to approach different areas and demographics a little differently. So they might not make as much money, but you look at their, how many charge offs do they have? If they have one or two, that's sort of normal, to be quite honest. And that wouldn't deter me. Whereas in another neighborhood, that would completely X you out of the renting pool, right? But I won't go past more than one or two. It better be really small. So if they have like 10 charge offs or like just doesn't pay anything, that's a red flag that regardless of they're just not into paying their obligations and they're not stepping foot in my house. So I had a few of those just recently on a turnover I had. And he actually, I had 2 tenants who applied. I had one person who made $6,000 a month. He worked at like this defense institute out in Columbus, and he had like 10 charge offs. 6,000 a month is pretty decent. And then I had this other girl who was about just at the 2.5 time mark of what I want. Between the 2 people or the one person, it needs to be 2.5 times the rent, else they just don't have the money to live the life they want. They have to find a cheaper place. She was right at the mark, but she had perfect credit and paid all of her obligations. So I went with her, even though this other guy has a ton of cash. That behavior is that I just don't pay when I don't want to pay. And I'm not scared of any consequences.
Right. So making sure that they've got good credit history as far as meeting their obligations there, because that'll translate into whether or not they'll pay rent on time.
Couple blemishes are cool. That's fine. But poor doesn't mean charge off city.
Right.
Or hourly worker doesn't mean I don't pay any. That's just not what it means. And if you think that way, you might put someone in going, oh, that's what people. No, people aren't like that. So everyone has standards. It doesn't matter how much money you make. So you make sure they're up to theirs and that they honor their commitments. And the amount of money you make each month does not determine that. And you can see from a credit report where that is. And if I did take that other guy, there's different things that you can do. If I had to, because of that, I would say, first and last month's rent. And one person mentioned you can even charge them as much of the security deposit as you can. Sometimes you can charge 2 months for the security deposit. So, 2 months for the security deposit, first month's rent, last month's rent. You come up with that cash, I can handle you, because an eviction is usually, 1 to 3 months depending on what state or market you're in.
Yeah, so then you can put them in a position where they really need to prove that they want that property.
Yeah, and that you're not going to be stuck holding the bag, because if they do stop paying, you should have them out way before any of that money runs out.
Very good. That's great advice. So this has been so eye-opening getting to know you, Lisa, and learning about this, that if we just kind of look outside of where we would traditionally look to invest in rental properties, we can find something that can bring in a good income stream for our family, and we can pay cash by for doing so. So for 30 to 40,000, that's a lot easier to save up than like a 200, 300,000 or whatever. So I really like this approach. And so where can people learn more about you and how they can work with you?
Thank you. I appreciate those words. I really do, because I'm not an advocate of no credit, no money, no problem. I think that's ridiculous. You can't invest in anything with no credit and no money. But that's just part one. And like I said, now that we've been working together, I send people to you when they need that part one. Okay, they need money and some credit help. Get them there. When it's there, you give them to me. We will get them the rest of the way, right? So there's nothing I advocate that's super easy, or it's not hard or anything, but you got to work for it. You got to look around and hustle just a little bit to get the good deals. But as long as you're willing to put in the work, it's fine. And some people aren't. They just look at you like, aren't you going to do everything? And some people are like, I'm ready to get this thing done, and I should do it myself. You know what I mean? This is my business. So that's what I love hearing and seeing. I'm never trying to trick anyone to thinking that, anyone's going to do the work for you. I think you should do the work yourself so you can see exactly what it takes, and it builds your own confidence and experience, which is what you need to keep going forward and building your portfolio. But so thank you for that. And that's just what I want everyone to know. It's not a walk in the park, but it is, it's easy to accomplish, especially if you have people to help you and give you the right steps and systems to implement so you don't have any horror stories. There's no reason for that. And I do help people with that on my site if they're interested. So you can go to my website, affordablerealestateinvestments.com, and you can get the link right underneath the page. And if you do end up talking to me, because you either sign up for a free strategy session, because I do offer that, and or you get one of the courses and we correspond through that way. Just make sure to mention that you heard me through our debt-free family, so I know to give your audience a little extra attention and that, I know that they were working with you, and it just helps set up the relationship better, that I know that they came with a good background.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone out there for listening. Hope to see you at my site sometime or get to talk to every one of you.
Yeah. Talk to you soon, Lisa.
You as well.
Thanks again to Lisa for sharing her wisdom about real estate investing with us. I hope that you enjoyed the interview, and you can learn more about Lisa and her programs at ourdebtfreefamily.com/affordable real estate investments. And yes, that was my cat Miley making a cameo at the end of the interview. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you considered investing in real estate? Does investing in sub 30K rental properties appeal to you? Please share in the comments below. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I would be honored if you would share this with your friends. And I invite you to join me in our private Facebook group called Your Debt Freedom Family, where we've got an awesome community of people who are kicking debt to the curb so they can break free and live life on their terms. Just head over to ourdebtfreefamily.com/yourfamily to join. I'd love to see you there. Remember, keep moving forward toward your goals. You really can live the life that you dream about. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.